The unholy alliance. This is a concept that I want to trademark. I think this is a really cool idea. I missed out on the uncanny valley, and I never trademarked interesting decisions. But unholy alliance, I think, is a concept that, in many ways, defines the relationship between the player and the designer. The unholy alliance is an agreement that the player and the designer make with each other. I'm going to pretend certain things, you're going to pretend certain things, and together we'll have a great experience. So one of the things that we pretend as designers is that the player is good. You're really good. That's kind of a mantra from us, that we want the player to feel good about the play experience and themselves as they're playing. And one example, perhaps of where this kind of went off the tracks, is in the history of flight simulators going back a number of years. Early on, they were kind of easy to play, very accessible. You'd shoot down a lot of planes, you'd have a lot of fun. And then we got to where every succeeding iteration of flight simulators became a little more realistic, a little more complex, a little more of a simulation. And pretty soon the player went from I'm good to I'm not good. I'm confused. My plane is on fire and I'm falling out of the sky. And the fun kind of went out of them. And I think we have to be aware of this phenomenon, that it's all about the player. The player is the star of the game. Their experience is what's key, what's critical, and keeping them feeling good about themselves is certainly an important part of the experience that we provide for them. Another part of this unholy alliance is the player's role. The player really needs to be willing to suspend their disbelief. They need to inhabit that character. They need to take on that role that you're providing them, whether it's a king of a great civilization or managing a railroad or being a cool pirate. The player has to be willing to suspend their disbelief. That's they're part of the bargain. When we go to a movie, my wife, I ask her after we've seen a movie, how did you like the movie? A lot of times she'll say, well, I came out of that movie twice, or I never got into that movie, or I never came out of the movie. Very aware of the value of suspending your disbelief to enjoy the experience or to make it more compelling. So part of our job is to help the player to suspend their disbelief. And I think in some ways, those of us that are old-time designers have a little bit of an advantage there, in that we worked in the good old days of 16-color graphics and things like that, where we really had to work hard to get the player to believe that what was happening on the screen was the management of a great empire or building a railroad system or things like that. So I think having that experience was helpful in really understanding some of the challenges of getting the player to suspend their disbelief. One of the other agreements that we make, I think, in this unholy alliance with the player is the idea of moral clarity. And let me give you an example. Here's a screenshot from Civilization Revolution, where we're negotiating with the great Genghis Khan. And one of the comments that I got back from playtesters was, these leaders, are very kind of cranky and aggressive. I might be winning the battle against them. They might be down to their last city, and they're still kind of up there saying, hey, you'll never take me down. I'm the greatest civilization of all time. Come on, attack me. I dare you. And they said, well, that just doesn't seem right. They shouldn't have that attitude if I'm winning. And my question was, well, what would you like them to say? Do you want them to say, oh, please don't hurt me. We have only one city left, and there's women and children there, and please leave me alone? To me, that's like a moral dilemma. I want to win. I want to capture their city. It's Genghis Khan, for goodness sake. But I'm faced with a moral dilemma. I think it's more satisfying, and that's something we discovered. It's more satisfying to win against bad Genghis, cranky Genghis, than it is if there was some kind of a moral cloud over the actions that you were taking. MAD is a concept called mutually assured destruction. How many of you remember the Cold War? Let's hear it for the Cold War. Okay. The idea of mutually assured destruction was that we had all these nuclear weapons and the Russians had all these nuclear weapons, and we could just blow each other up anytime we wanted to. But the reason we didn't because we knew the other side had all these nuclear weapons. And there's an amazing parallel to that in the relationship between game designers and the player. The player can actually destroy the experience at any time they want to. They can quit the game. They can, play in a different way. They can cheat. They can do all sorts of stuff to kind of destroy the experience. And as a game designer, we can mess up the game as well. I mean, we can kind of lose the thread of the fantasy. There was a game that we were working on at Microprose many years ago that kind of illustrated this to me. It was an adventure game, and basically you kind of started at the beginning of the road, and you adventured your way on down until you got to the castle, and finally got to see the king and had gone through this great adventure. And when you got to the king, all of a sudden it was revealed to you that the king who you thought was a good guy is actually a bad guy, and everything was turned around, and you had to go back down the path you just come back to the beginning to do the real thing that you were supposed to do in the first place. So to me, that was us messing up the game. I mean, basically, I can imagine the design meetings, imagine the look on the player's face when they realize that all this work they've done was in vain, and the surprise and the amazing design, they'll think, what an amazing design to surprise me like that. I said, no, that's not what they're going to think. They're going to think, I just wasted 8 hours on this stupid game. And so at that point, they would mutually assuredly destruct the game, I believe. And so there are ways, I think, again, that we need to be careful that we're true to the story of the game and value the player's time. Another part of this alliance, I think, that we make with players is in the area of style, things that convey what the spirit of your game is. If you start the game off and it's kind of have kind of a lighthearted music, atmosphere, cartoony graphics, and all of a sudden people's heads start exploding, then you haven't lived up to the alliance. You're not giving the player what you promised them. On the other hand, if you have dark, foreboding sound and music and ends up being a very simple game, again, you kind of are fooling the player. And if I'm playing a game that starts off light and happy and cartoony, and all of a sudden terrible things start to happen, that's when the player loses their suspension of disbelief and turns off your game and moves on. So I think the only way to kind of maintain the suspension of disbelief, which is critical to keeping the player in the game, is to really make that a priority and use things like humor, style, music, atmosphere, all these tools to be consistent and keep the player in your world. So probably where it became most clear to me that player psychology has absolutely nothing to do with rational thought was in the process of putting together the battle system in Civilization Revolution. My background is in mathematics and science and programming, and I think of myself as a logical person. And what we did in Revolution was we would show you before a battle what the odds were. In this example, our attacker here has a 1.5. And the defender, the barbarians, have a 0.5. They would have a 1. Barbarians are basically 1. But since they're uncivilized, they take a 50% penalty for that. So they're only 0.5. And part of the fun of being a designer is kind of throwing those little things into the game, you know, uncivilized, minus 50%. Take that.